right there.
Have you done anything to it other than let the rats at it?
I'm aging it.
Oh, okay, so patina is worth money?
Well, no, but rarity and scarcity are.
It's early morning at the Rust Bros shop.
Come on.
Oh, look how that hood opens.
It is nice.
A collector has come to look at one of Mike's latest acquisitions, a 1970 Super Bee.
Actually, it's in good shape.
I know Rick and Ed are serious guys because I've seen some of Rick's cars. Rick spent hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars on Dodges. I know they probably got cash. I've owned 4 Bs. This is the only one that was factory buckets. Super Bs, they made 12,000. AC bucket seat cars, they might have made 2,000 or 3,000. So it could be one of 1,500 left. You don't just find those cars.
So how serious are you about selling it?
I want 20K.
18.
No,
Come on.
no,
It needs a lot of work.
I don't care. Go find another one that doesn't. Pay 50. The car's straight. Sure, it needs a little bit of rust repair here and there, but everything's here.
Let me think.
Okay, well, don't think too long, because now that I'm back looking at it, I'm starting to get emotional attachment.
Ed, let's have a talk. It's a big project.
Huge project.
But you know what? It's actually a good car. It's not
Solid.
rotten.
Solid. You're not gonna build it.
You, I've sold 2 this year.
You're gonna start digging into it, and you can trust me on this one, there's gonna be some issues with it.
Ave, I have a restoration shop. Why are you telling me what
Because
to
I
look at?
know how much you get into it by the time you're doing it.
Avery would love for me to sell all of my cars at his price. So would Connor. They don't have the time, the money, nothing invested in them. So don't tell me how to sell my shit.
20 grand,
We're gonna be into that thing for probably
another 15 grand.
total.
You have a gazillion cars. Look at the financial end of it.
You don't get it. These things were an economy car. Basically came with no options. Well, this one's got some pretty funky options.
Mike's in the hole. Summer's half over. We need to get cash wherever we can find it.
Hey, Rick.
Hey, we like it, but I don't want to pay 20 for it, that's for sure. So that's about it.
No, it's just a good piece, and I'm in no big rush to get rid of it. To me, these things are more than pieces of metal. They're automotive art. And some pieces of art, I just as soon leave hanging on the wall, so to speak.
I'll tell you what, let me think on it.
Yeah, it ain't
And
going
I'll-
nowhere, Rick.
Yeah, I know it isn't. Because I think him and I would be the only nuts one to pay that if we
Yeah,
did.
looking at 20 grand doesn't really make me happy. 70 Super Bs make me happy. So I'm actually really glad they didn't buy it. Thanks for
Thanks
looking.
for showing it to us.
No problem, guys.
What are we doing this morning? Where are we going?
We're gonna go look at a 67, 68 Cougar. Last fall, a couple of my dad's old buddies that worked with him on the railroad stopped by, and the one guy apparently was gonna do this old Cougar up. So we'll go see what it looks like.
But remember, Mike, at the end of the day, it is a job.
I know, he's a friend of my dad's. Let me talk money.
Yeah.
I'll listen to your concerns, but
Okay.
we're going to look.
Here's a place right here.
Hey, Wade, how's it
Mike,
going?
how you doing?
Hey, good to see you. Where's this Cougar hiding out?
In the garage.
Okay. There's a Cougar in here? Oh, there it is.
Cool.
It'd be nice if we could roll it
Well,
out.
you can. It's on wheels.
Oh,
Okay. Get her up to ramming speed.
okay, that's good, Wade. It's a cool piece. Let's just take a quick look. Is this a 67 or
67,
60?
yeah.
Yep, 7F91C, so it's probably a 289 car?
Well, it's got a 302 now.
What I really like about the Mercury Cougar is its styling. I love that long front end, that short back end. I don't know why it's never caught on as much as the Mustang did, but to me, it's a classier looking car. So, what's the story on this car?
Well, I bought this car from my daughter, and the plan was to, restoration, and so then after we started it, she passed away in a car accident.
Oh, no, that's
So
sad.
it was been sitting since then. It was hard to work on, you know.
Every time he goes in the garage, he has to look at it, and he was supposed to be doing it with Candace.
How long ago was that?
14 years.
It's a long time to look and think.
Yeah.
She was a very pretty girl, eh, Wade?
Yeah, she sure was.
Yes. I can't imagine losing my daughter and then looking at something for 14 years, and every time you do, it reminds me of her.
I'm never going to sell the car. I thought, well, I'll get at it when I retire, and the days aren't long enough.
No.
It means a lot to Wade. They were supposed to do it together, and he wants it nice, and I want it nice.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, well, let us take a look at it, and maybe we can help. Well, I'm just looking at, like, the bottom of the doors look good. Like, I mean, they're just starting to bulge a bit, but they haven't separated. And these frame rails look really good, eh?
Well, there's definitely good parts.
They're like brand new, Wade. Hopefully the front ones look as good, and that's a major concern out of the way.
Now, can I be the bad guy and show
What?
some concerns?
Okay, what do we got?
That inner fender looks like it's been fiberglassed in it. That's all fiberglass in there.
These Cougars, they were a good car in their day. This car right now, it's got issues. Last time I checked, fiberglass is for boats.
Okay, let's just check out the front frame rails. Hang on. I'm stuck on my hair. There we go. See, this frame rail's starting to go, so we're gonna have to change this, cut this apart, and do a little bit of repair. The rest looks really solid. So, what's the story on this engine?
It hasn't started up for 14, 15 years. I put a wrench on it.
Yeah.
I spun it.
Is that what you want to run?
Yeah, may as well.
Okay.
That's what I got.
Okay, so Wade, there's a little more work than what I thought. The car, I mean, there are some major issues. The main issue is gonna be what their budget is.
How far do you want to go? What kind of a job do you want?
I want a job that's not gonna fall apart, and it doesn't have to be, you know, like
Okay.
a $100,000 car because
Okay.
I don't have $100,000.
No, you want a nice driver.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we try and build, okay? I mean, basically, just looking at it, I'm thinking somewhere around 20K.
Yeah.
And that'd be, I mean,
No.
I started out telling her I could do it for 5.
you can't.
And then-
Lying to your wife like that?
I knew he was lying
But,
too.
yeah.
You know, we had this discussion about Mike spending too much money on these cars. He's learned absolutely nothing from it. His emotions are involved now, and that car is gonna be about 40 grand by the time it's done.
I look at it, I see 500 hours here minimum. He looks at it, he sees 200 hours.
Avery,
Okay, it's
be
whatever.
like the Grinch and have your heart grow 3 sizes this day.
Mike's got a big heart, but you know what? It is a business. Compassion, profit, bankruptcy.
But we're gonna do the best job that we can, and guaranteed you'll be happy with it.
Yeah. just
Okay,
a little
I
bit.
think
you.
we're good.
I trust Mike to do this job, and Candace would be really happy to have the car done. And I thought, well, this would be a good way to get it all finished.
Let the pressure off.
Thinking of Candace right now, and she'll always be with us for sure. Bittersweet.
Wade, he's had a tough go, and he's been looking at it for 14 years. He doesn't want to wait until it's too late. Now he's fulfilled an obligation to his daughter, even though she's gone. And I think it'd be a good thing to do for him.
We've taken on one big job, my friend.
I like the springs that are on it.
Later that day, over at Avery's shop,
There's way too much junk in here.
No, there's not. It's all treasures.
Mike's been driving me crazy at the shop. He does not listen to anything I have to say. He will not take any of my advice. So you know what? I need to take a little break, get back into my own space.
Hey, where's this quad going?
Outside, it's leaving here.
Avery put his own projects on hold to start Rust Bros. But this summer, he's hired his son Chafin to help him out.
You don't need to stay in school.
Yeah.
Look at me, it turned out just fine.
Oh, yeah. Working with my son is a fairly interesting situation. 20 years old. If you don't just talk to the little millennium just exactly perfect, he gets his little mind all bent out of shape. That pisses me off the most. The cigarette butts drive you just about mentally insane. Like, I love them to death. But it's a typical thing of working with your family. It should be against the law. Look at this, cigarette butts. I don't smoke. We need to do an assessment of this here motor and this Jewel.
Okay, well, that should be easy enough.
It's gonna be quite easy for me. See?
I ain't cranking
No,
that.
you are cranking.
There's no way I'm cranking that.
Look at that.
3 weeks ago, up at Avery's mom's farm,
This is a genuine barn find.
Mike discovered a 1926 Ford Model T.
We just want to know if we can take that with us when we go. Maybe get it running.
We could make some kind of a horse trade.
And persuaded her to let Avery take it home to fix it up for her.
Don't screw up the car.
So what do you want to do here? The wraparound seat, or do you want to do the cab?
I want to do it as a truck. The problem being is, it's not what you want to do, it's the availability and parts to be found. Okay, peel the hood off this Jewel. You know what? This is gonna be an opportunity to learn him, what a hard day's work's all about, and maybe whip his attitude into shape a little bit. The problem with this motor is these things are from a different era. Like, everything's weird on this thing.
It's got a 5 wiring wire harness.
All for the spark plugs.
Oh, so these are the coil packs then?
Uh-huh.
They look like Morse code machines. This Model T, my dad's been trying to get it started since he was my age. So it's gonna be very cool if we get it started.
You notice it's got 3 pedals down there?
Yeah. Clutch, gas, brake?
No.
Okay.
It doesn't have a gas pedal. This here's your clutch. The middle one's reverse, high and low. This is the throttle.
Okay.
This here's spark advance. So go back, crank her, start it, give it a little bit of advance, give it a little bit of throttle, and then down the road you go. I tell you what, go get the battery pack out of there. I want to see if these coils got any power in them.
How you gonna test that?
I'll show you. I tried starting this car, 25 years ago, and the problems haven't gone away. Is any power there?
12 volts.
Coil packs convert a car battery's 12 volts into the several thousand volts required to ignite the fuel.
There.
Yep, 1228.
If we can get 3 coil boxes working, we possibly may be able to try to start this thing. See if there's any power going through this thing.
You got a screwdriver? Here, it's got a rubber handle.
I've been electrocuted quite a bit by coils, and let me tell you what, it'll get your attention. That's a lively one. We got a bad coil, I think. Okay, they can crank this thing over, and we'll see if the ignition works. Turn it slow. There we go. That's good. Ow! That hurt.
Some of the coils are producing power, but not all, meaning the engine won't light.
Enough around this thing. I thought we might be able to get it started, but I do know where some boxes are. The Great White Shark has a whole bunch of coils on a Fordson tractor.
Another one of your crazy friends, eh?
Yep.
I'm driving.
Woohoo! And down the road we go.
Dad, look how cool this thing would be to drive.
Where?
At Rust Valley's biggest wrecking yard.
Wasp nest.
Donnie, better known as the Great White Shark, he's got more junk than anybody else in the neighborhood. He's got to have some pieces here for this Model T somewhere.
Oh, you said that tractor was here.
A tractor was here. It was right there, I think.
What color was it?
I'm sure it was gray. It's a Fordson tractor.
Well,
and it had coil packs on it. Where is it?
I just took a walk over there, and there's a yellow one.
There's nothing ever moves in this yard. There it is right there. Does it look yellow to you? Look, what color is that tractor?
You're the
Does
one.
it look yellow?
The tractor's not here anymore.
Well, this piece of shit car was in the way.
Get up, get on.
Anyways, let's see if the coils are still in it. Woo! They even look like nobody's haven't half killed them yet. It must be the only new-looking thing Donnie owns.
Don't tell him. The White Shark.
What are you two shit rats doing?
We're trying to get my old Model T thing car started.
Whose Model T?
Mine.
He thinks it's his.
Yeah, it's...
You don't even know how to drive a Model T.
You know what? Not very many people do.
How many pedals are in the Model T?
3.
What do they do?
What do you do with the 3 pedals?
Middle one's reverse.
And what do you do with the other 2?
I forget.
Yeah, because you don't know how to drive a Model T.
The problem being is, Donnie, is these coils on this car, I think, are in original coils. And there's 2 that are good and 2 that are bad, and they're working intermittent. So, what are these jewels worth?
50 bucks.
I don't know.
50 bucks.
That boat the sock.
The Great White Shark. He can smell $50 from about 10 miles away. There you go.
Sweet. Okay, well.
I need some doors off one of them old Fords if you ever come across one. About a 65.
Can you quit looking around?
What for?
Because trying to protect my inheritance. Can we go now? Where Donnie tries to steal it all.
Let me see that sock.
Yeah.
No, the other sock.
There, Donnie.
Why don't you buy that van? That
No,
van.
come
You
on,
need
guys. Can we
there?
go? No, Dad.
No.
just Stop.
The one ton.
Oh my.
That right
God.
there?
The Fargo, yeah.
That's an international.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot.
Okay, cool. Okay, good. Come on, let's go.
Have you ate yet?
Let's go.
What?
Come on. You don't need to be buying any more shit.
Why not?
Guys, too broke. Let's go.
Hey, bring that sock back here.
No.
Connor!
Yo.
It's time to get this Cougar into Seacount City. We finally got room.
Back at the Rust Bros shop,
We pushing it?
There's no engine or tranny. Shouldn't be that bad.
Mike and Connor are starting disassembly on the 1967 Cougar.
Go, 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 go! Oh, baby. Oh. Okay. You know, we can almost get 2 cars here.
No.
I'm just
No, we can't.
We could. We got lots of room.
Oh,
What?
look at that.
Corrosion.
Fenders are solid.
This is not metal.
No. No, listen to it. Look, that hole, that's all fiberglass.
You think so?
Yeah.
No. Tell me it ain't so, bro. Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, it is.
Unbelievable.
There's definitely more fiberglass than steel in this trunk. Okay, well, moment of truth. Let's take a look and see how bad this floor is. Ooh, it's all fiberglass. It looks like steel, but it's all fiberglass. This thing's almost beyond repair. It's way worse than it was supposed to be. Look.
Then they painted it black, so it looked like it was metal.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
Jesus.
there's no floor left there at all.
No. Basically, there's so much fiberglass where there should be structure. I think the car is dangerous. If you're ever in an accident, the thing would just buckle. I mean, there's a reason they make them out of steel.
Oh, there's nothing holding this car together.
Pretty hard to tell when we were crawling underneath it and looking, because you can just see black. There's no way that we're patching this.
No.
No, we'd be welding like 60 square feet of junk in here.
20 grand ain't gonna go very far if we gotta rebuild this whole car. Like,
Well, we better work really fast.
you might have to find him another Cougar. Don't you have a couple of these?
I got 4 or 5, but this is the one he wanted to do with his daughter.
Yeah, I know, but we cannot do this for 20 grand.
I should know better.
Yes, you should.
I hope they work.
Back at Avery's shop,
Oh, they're tight.
he and Chafin are testing the new coil packs in the Model T.
We need to see if this thing's got some power in it.
We cleaned some wire connections, we got a new set of coil boxes for it, and we got lucky.
Hello, sir.
Lordco had a set of spark plugs laying around. It must have been in stock since the beginning of time.
Okay, turn that crank over. Okay.
Do we know if these coil packs are even good?
Ow! That's hot. I think they're good. Grab me that screwdriver. Okay, crank this jewel over. Oh, hear that?
We're in business. Couple more parts.
Turn it over again. Sounds just like that. This motor probably hasn't run in over 30 years. But I tell you what, it's got compression, it will run.
Whoa! Trying to flood the thing? Just put gas everywhere with this electricity.
Anyways, we need to be careful starting this thing.
Hey, you pull that thing over.
You chicken shit.
Go.
If it's the last thing I do, this motor will run.
Well, I can see in one of these cars, you wouldn't need a gym membership. Go grab that can of ether. It'll either rip my goddamn arm off or it'll start one of the two. Yeah, spray some shit in holes.
The engine is finally showing signs of life.
We got that car running. Feels awesome. I like seeing my dad happy, and I like seeing him do the stuff he loves to do.
Look at that. Look at that.
If my dad sets his mind to something with getting something running, it will run.
I'm super stoked it runs. It sounds actually not bad. It is the most simplest engine ever made, and for some reason, it was the hardest engine I've ever worked on to get to run. I like this thing. We should check the oil in it. That'd be a hell of an idea. What do you think, Shafe?
It's different.
You just opened them little pepcocks down there.
What's this big gop of weld on the side of the frame?
What are you talking about?
Something you might want to see underneath there. Hey, you see it?
Yeah, I see it. It's pretty hard not to see it. I don't know who patched this thing. It's not real safe. That thing, it needs to be cut out of there and fixed. You know what? That pisses me off. This is never cut and dried with this old stuff. It's a good thing a guy likes his car.
Morning.
It's the final swap meet of the summer at the White Post Auto Museum.
Hey, Jim. How's it going, bud?
But Mike's busy buying, not selling.
I'm going to try and get a little bit of an early bird head start, check out the vendors and see if there's anything that I really need before everybody else gets all the good deals. Isn't that pretty? Mark, is this your pile of choice automotive memorabilia?
Yes.
What's the deal on that beautiful 57 grill? I have the panel that needs that piece.
150.
150 bucks?
Yeah.
That's totally reasonable.
Okay.
Done deal. Good man. Thank you. Beauty. How's it going?
Look what I just scored. 50 bucks.
These are worth $1,000.
I know they are. Can you believe that?
No, you're pissing me off. that still owes me $3 grand on that car.
Oh, is that right?
Oh yeah, I'm gonna
Okay.
phone him. Geez, I remember this one. Oh wait, I own it. Connor.
Hey.
Where are you?
I'm up at your shop.
It's hard to sell anything when you're not for sale signs on anything.
Okay, I'm on my way.
Hey, Mike.
What?
How are you supposed to sell anything? You know nothing on nothing on nothing.
Why don't you put some prices on these windows? Start writing with your finger.
Up the road from the swap meet, the crew has rolled out some classic cars, hoping to attract buyers.
25K. What do you think?
Sure.
This is worth 15K all day long.
Mike.
What?
You need a pair of binoculars to see the price on it.
Avery.
What?
You're the last person to be given advice on how to
Mike,
sell
how much shit have I sold?
How much shit is in your yard right now?
What?
Exactly.
How much shit is in your yard?
More.
Hey, you know what you need to do today?
Sell
something. Just sell something.
I will.
Okay. I gotta go.
Okay, take care.
Sell some stuff, like your kid asked.
What do you know about selling? You've had that stupid friggin' vet parked here for 2 years. Bet you $100 you can't give that car away to them.
I bet you $100 I can sell that car today.
You're on. Get on it.
I'll sell this piece of shit. I'm amazed this thing started.
Why is it going forward?
Because you can't find a reverse?
Me.
He is a I would never buy anything off that man. I think you just devalued it a couple K.
It looks good in the trees.
Cranker. Keep going. Whoa. Hey, you better go make a sign. How are people gonna know it's for sale?
I'm amazed Mike hasn't discovered this yet.
That's the best you could do. Ave, I'll go make you a sign. That is just so sad, it's beyond description. It's almost as sad as this car.
You want to buy a car? Or you get a free plant with it. A daffodil, begonia.
No.
Hey, man, how you doing?
Hey, how's it going, buddy?
Oh, good. How's the day, man?
Good, and yourself?
Good. Looking for a ride, man?
Oh, yeah. This is a beast right here.
You bet. It's an 81, real close to the last of this style. It's been looked after mechanically very well,
but it needs an interior in it. It had real leather seats at one time.
It smells like Grandpa's jacket in here.
Oh, yes. Here, we'll take a look under the hood. 5.7 liter. Hey? Oh, look at that. She's had some high performance work done to her. Jump in there. Start her up.
She purrs like a kitty. Take it for a test drive?
I'll take you for a ride.
Oh, she goes good. And she brakes too. Watch out, I'm taking to the highway.
Hey, she's got a bit of pep, eh?
She has her pep. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah, she goes. She's a keeper.
What do you think?
I don't know, the upholsteries will have to do some work in there.
Well, 10 grand, my friend.
10 grand, I think she's worth it about 75 to 8.
I tell you what, 9.
9? This is, what about 85? Just to get it out of your hair here. Your parking lot looks a little bit cleaner.
This parking lot will never look clean.
I tell you what, I got a coffee shop in town here. If you come out, I'll just feed you. I'll give you some coffees, a few free lunches, and that'll make your belly happy.
Food always makes it go better, my friend. I think we can do 85.
Can do 85?
Yes.
Great.
You put your mind to selling the car, you can sell it. Mike thinks I'm an idiot. He needs to pay attention. I do know what I'm talking about sometimes.
Dave,
What?
what's happening?
Well, I just sold this car to this fine gentleman. We also got free coffees, too.
That's right.
He owns a coffee shop. We got 10 free coffees.
You get some free lunch.
I guess that means I owe you $100.
Uh-huh.
Jesus. Did he give you the warranty?
Yeah.
The full warranty?
As soon as I get out of here.
It's gone.
it's gone.
Okay, good. As long as you know. Good luck. Hey, Wade. How's it going?
Good, how are you doing?
Mike's called Wade into the shop to deliver some bad news about the Cougar.
There's just too much damage to bring that shell back to life. There's going to be some hard decisions have to be made. Someone was quite creative here. I mean, everything that we thought when we looked at it was metal, they just laid fiberglass matting over everything.
Oh, my God.
Same thing with the trunk. It all looked like metal when we were underneath it, but all of this is fiberglass.
Oh, my God.
All of that. It's like we punched holes through it everywhere.
Oh, wow.
This Cougar build, the emotion and the memories that are attached is because the father and daughter were going to build the car. And then the daughter tragically died. I don't know exactly what Wade feels when he looks at the car, but I know it's more than that 67 Cougar staring at him. What we wanted to talk to you about, I have 4 of these down in my back field, and I have a really good 68. Basically, we'd be using one of our shells as a donor and putting all of your parts on it. We could use your motor, your tranny, your doors, your trunk,
The interior.
lights, your interior,
Dash.
and then it saves us 400 hours of trying to fix this.
Oh, yeah, well.
I don't really like to ask them, but to do the best job we can do, we need to start with something better. Then we'll walk down in the back field and I'll show you our donor body.
Okay.
See? All nice and straight. I mean, it's got disc brakes, it's got most of the AC stuff. Good roof. And then the same thing with the trunk, right? This is still all steel. Well, this one I think would be way easier to fix.
Well, the floor looks way better.
But anyway, between this car and your car, we can make something that's a nice driver.
Well, I think that's probably a much better idea. Save a lot of work and save money.
There's work, time, money. So, I mean, it's a win-win-win.
I'm happy that I brought it to Mike. It is a way bigger job than I anticipated.
Hey, you know what? I think I've lost a pint and a half of blood.
Yeah.
Well, let's get out of here.
Let's get out of here. Go. He's agreed that it's a better option. It's a whole weight off of our shoulders, but bottom line is the heart and soul of the car will still be there. The doors, the gauges, the upholstery, it'll all be her car. here a month working on this. What the have you done?
The next morning at Avery's garage.
Waiting for a hand. You can't do everything yourself all the time. My dear child, nowhere to be seen. So I brought Mike in. Mike can come give me a hand. Hang on. Hello.
Is that your useless kid?
Why is my kid calling from your kid's phone? Where is your kid at?
On the boat for 4 days, drinking.
Where are you guys at? What are you doing?
We're in Nielsen.
I thought you were supposed to be at work today.
No.
Typical millennium child. Like work? When I get around to it. Why are you on Connor's phone when Connor's on holidays?
Because we're hanging out.
Oh, that's why I'm here helping your dad?
Why? Hello?
Hey.
Hark, do I hear women in the background?
No. Yes.
If he starts being a village idiot, you be his big brother and you correct his doings, my friend. Okay, bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Well, what's the plan?
I tell you what, none of this stuff is correct for this truck, except for the frame and some of the motor parts. Get a stripper down to nothing and start over.
Good, well, where's some tools? Let's get this thing torn apart. I think they're lag screws. Give me a 7/16, Dave.
Here, try that. I'm gonna pull this turtle deck off.
As usual, I'm laying in the dirt and you're up there using an impact. That's okay, I'm getting in touch with the zen of this 90-year-old piece here.
I don't know if I'm repairing a car or taking a building apart.
Okay. Ow! Did it hurt right away?
Yeah, it did!
Oh! Sorry, bud. I'll kiss it better.
Yeah, perfect. You know what this is called, Mike?
Karma.
Yeah, off. Hang on, we got one screw over here.
Why don't you just go under there and undo it?
No, you can't.
It's your car. Destroy it how you will.
I tell you what, I've been looking at lots of these vehicles. I was gonna do it as a truck,
Yep.
but I changed my mind. My vision is to make a convertible roadster. 90% of all of the trucks you see out there were made out of cars. The simple reason is you got more fuel if you had a truck.
During the Depression and that.
That way they got more fuel ration out of it. I do believe this used to be a car at one time.
Huh, maybe I think like a roadster, a convertible would be cool. She can just put around at 28 miles an hour, talking on her cell phone and be all good. I do have some parts for these down the yard. I'm pretty sure I got a tub. I know I got some doors.
You know what, before I go any further, I gotta convince my mother that this is a good idea. This is gonna be an interesting conversation. It's God's way of reprieving me. She's not answering the phone.
Hello.
Hi. This project of yours here that we're doing for you, I think we got the perfect direction in what to go for you.
Oh yeah, what's that?
You're gonna get a convertible roadster.
Not a farm wagon.
No, you don't need a farm wagon. As all it'll give you do is more incentive to drive around and collect junk.
Can I get a sheep in there to take it to the vet clinic?
Yeah, put it in the turtle top there and lock it in there. It'll be good in there. It'll be fine, yeah.
I will see.
Okay, bye.
Okay then, we'll see you in a while.
People wonder why I am the way I am. Hey, come by it naturally.
We got his hood, we got his scoop, we've got his grills.
Yeah, because his grills were in good shape.
Yep.
Today, Mike and Connor are transferring parts from Wade's 67 Cougar to the new 68 Shell.
We got a brand new full quarter coming. Carl's got the patches made for the trunk drop-off.
Can't believe how solid this thing is compared to the other one.
Oh, I know. So then we got his fenders, trunk lid. Actually, why don't we just slap one of these fenders on just to see? I'm liking it. It looks like a car already. We're half done. It's almost restored. The more we can use of his car, the more it's gonna feel like it is his car, right?
As much of it as we can, right?
Yeah. The steering wheel, like we'll pull that wheel. I mean, it is an original 67 wheel, so at least when he's driving the car, he's holding on to like the memory. Pop that wheel. What do we need? I bet you that's a 15/16 or 1 inch.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Look out, look out.
Okay. Oh, that thing hasn't been off in a while. Use the puller.
Where's the puller? Wrench.
Got coming?
We're good.
Perfect. Done. Now we've got the steering wheel out. Time to start doing fenders, doors. There's a whole bunch of stripping and grinding.
Okay, well, let's get these into
Okay,
cast.
we'll get these. We'll grab the valances, the trunk, all that stuff.
Okay.
We'll see what they look like naked.
I bet they look better than you naked.
That's not saying much. He's entrusted us to do this build in memory of his daughter, but it's gonna take us a little more time than what we figured.
Getting the Cougar restoration done right means more work and a longer wait for Wade and Charmaine.
It's gonna be a beautiful car, and the look on their faces when they see it is gonna more than make up for the money I'm losing. It's bad for business, but it's good for my soul.
The Ford Model T is still a long way from being done.
Well, you could have come back another 30 feet.
So, Avery's brought the car over to Rust Bros.
Oh, yeah. Ow! Good thing this is your mom's, not a real client.
Let her go. You couldn't do that with a modern day car.
No.
It looks like it's almost like it was gas welded. I don't know.
Chafin needs Mike's tools to fix the faulty gob weld on the frame.
Get in here, grind that down, and let's see how we're gonna correct the problem.
Yeah.
Let's get her on track.
While Chafin works inside,
I don't know what that stuff is.
Avery and Mike go hunting for parts to turn the Model T into a convertible roadster.
Isn't that a Model T top? Yeah.
It is. And this thing's in good shape. And if you got some doors for it,
well, let's go look.
My mother's worked hard her whole life. She's getting a car.
Ah.
That way when she comes and visits me, she can enjoy herself and have something to look forward to other than me aggravating her life.
good enough. Let's take a look. Ah. I tell you what, you redeemed yourself. Put her there. I think it's safe for Grandma now.
There you go.
Chafin, when he puts his mind to it, he's super talented. I'm quite proud of him.
Sure, that thing gets adjusted up a little bit.
You know what? My mother's not going to be able to hand crank this thing. It needs to have a good starter on it.
Okay, you got that seat?
Yeah, it's right here.
She'll be showing up in a couple days. We need to work as a team.
Oh, look at that.
We need to get it done. Woo-hoo!
This what you ran away from home to?
Yeah, it's paradise.
Avery's mother, Helen, has traveled down from Fort St. John to see her finished 1926 Ford Model T.
Avery, I just step into the phone booth and call the cab.
You never know, you might meet Superman in there.
And she's come dressed to match the era.
Where did you get that thing on your head you're wearing?
That's what flappers wear. And they usually have fringes on their skirt. They had a belt down here, long pearls, and feathers.
Are you ready for this?
Yeah, I'm ready.
I hope you like this thing. If you don't like it, I'll take it.
Well, it's gonna stay in the family.
Okay. Open the door!
Oh my God, it's got a chrome bumper. Oh my goodness. Yeah, she's pretty fine.
You like that?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Well,
it's pretty good, pretty good.
Yeah.
Now you know what your grandfather rode in.
Well, you didn't give us much to work with, Helen, but luckily I had some pieces.
I didn't know if it'd ever get restored, but I think they did a really good job on it. It's gorgeous.
We got away from those spoke wheels. We got some wire wheels on this thing. We hate to have a beaver attack you and chew off your wheel.
It's kind of a special car because my father sold these cars in the 20s out of Cadillac, Saskatchewan. So I kind of look at it as a family heirloom.
Got the gall darn custom wind deflector.
Oh, yes, you don't wreck your hairdo. Oh,
It's got a locking steering wheel on it, so nobody steals this thing.
Oh,
it
my
was an
God.
original option. But anybody nowadays, they couldn't steal it anyways because they wouldn't know how to drive it.
Yeah, the middle pedal's reverse.
Was that right?
The seats and the upholstery are all really nice in there. It's great. This is for the fishing rod?
No, that's where the convertible top goes on.
Oh, I thought maybe it was the buggy whip.
No.
Well, I often wanted a convertible.
Well, I think you should take Helen for a ride in this chariot, Abe.
This is gonna be an experience. Oh, there it is.
Oh, what's this, Abe?
Well, in the 1920s, they wore this kind of a hat, so there.
Oh, you like that, don't you?
That's stylish, Abe, yeah. Let's see. Oh. That is you. That is you, buddy.
Yeah.
My, look at you two. A picture of a simpler past.
Okay, guys, be safe now, eh? Have her back by 10.
Okay, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Let's go. See you in a week. If we don't come back, we'll write.
What do you figure?
Oh, I love this convertible. I always wanted a convertible, but I didn't know it was going to be blue. Yeah, I'm proud of him, what he's done with it. And he's a very talented person, you know. There's not too many things he can't fix if he takes a notion to.
Get this old tool into high gear. Oh, we're really cruising now. That's about 35 miles an hour wide open. Yeah. And this thing's pretty neat to drive. This build, it cost more than I thought it was going to cost. It took a long time, but at the end of the day, it's all worth it.
Can't believe the job you did on this thing.
Doing this Model T has got me thinking. You know what? I've sacrificed a lot working for Mike. I'm kind of wondering if maybe should I get into the restoration business with my son Chafin? I can make my own decisions and make my own mistakes. I need my own projects. I need my space. It's a chance to show what I'm capable of doing. It's time for me to go do my own thing and make my own way. I think it's time. I think it's time.
The morning mist hung low over Russ Valley like a half-forgotten confession, and Mike Hall stood at the edge of the yard with a coffee gone cold in his hand, staring at rows of cars that looked less like inventory and more like a graveyard of good intentions, each hood dented by weather and impatience, each windshield clouded by time, and as the sun tried to burn through the fog he felt that familiar tightening in his chest, the one that always came when he promised himself that today would be different, that today he would sell instead of save, choose profit over passion, logic over impulse, but the promise already felt thin because the valley had a way of whispering old lies back to him, telling him that every rusted shell still had a story worth rescuing if only he could hold on a little longer, find a little more money, make one more deal that would finally turn the chaos into order, and he knew, even before Avery Shove's truck rattled up the gravel drive, that he was standing at the beginning of the same cycle he had sworn to break, the same mistakes wearing new coats of paint. Avery stepped out with his usual half-grin, the one that mixed optimism with a trace of worry, and clapped Mike on the shoulder like a brother who knew better than to lecture but couldn't help himself anyway, and they walked together past the rows of cars while the valley slowly woke up, birds peeking through weeds growing from engine bays, metal creaking as it warmed, the air thick with oil and memory, and Avery talked about deadlines, bias, and the numbers that never quite added up, his voice practical, steady, the voice of a man who believed problems could be solved if you faced them head-on, while Mike nodded and listened and half of him agreed and the other half drifted toward a battered 68 Camaro buried 3-car steed that he had promised to sell last year, the one with the frame rod that made no sense to keep, yet somehow still felt like a personal challenge, a test of loyalty to the craft. And as they stopped in front of it, Mike felt that old spark flare again, the spark that had built Russ Valley and threatened to destroy it in equal measure. Avery reminded him that a buyer was coming later, someone serious this time, and Mike promised again that the Camaro would be ready, that he wouldn't get distracted, that he wouldn't drag another dead project into the yard. But even as the words left his mouth, a flatbed rolled past the gate on the highway carrying something long and low under a tarp, and Mike's eyes followed it like a dog tracking a scent, his mind already imagining what secrets might be hiding underneath, and Avery saw it too. And sighed, knowing that look meant trouble, knowing that passion was about to outpace sense once more. Inside the shop, the day unfolded in a familiar rhythm, grinders screaming, welders sparking, the radio crackling with classic rock that felt older every year, and the crew moved with the efficiency of men who had done this dance too many times to count, each one carrying his own mix of pride and frustration, because they all believed in the magic of transformation but also felt the weight of promises delayed and paychecks stretched thin. And as Mike dove into the Camaro, hands blackened, mind alive, he talked about how this one could be special, how the lines were still right, how the car deserved another chance, and the crew listened with that polite patience reserved for sermons they had heard before, knowing that arguing would only harden his resolve. Meanwhile, Avery fielded calls in the office, his pen tapping against a ledger that told a less romantic story, numbers circled in red, expenses creeping upward like rust itself, and he wondered how many more times they could afford to chase dreams that refused to turn into dollars, because Rust Valley was no longer just a passion project but a responsibility to everyone who depended on it, and the tension between those truths sat heavy in the room. By noon the buyer arrived, a clean-cut man with city shoes that didn't belong in the mud, his eyes scanning the yard with cautious interest, and Mike wiped his hands and put on his salesman's smile, walking him through the cars with the practiced ease of someone who could spin history into hope, and for a moment it seemed like the plan might actually work, the Camaro might finally leave, the ledger might breathe, but as they circled back Mike started talking about another car, then another, his enthusiasm spilling over, complicating what should have been a simple transaction, and Avery watched from a distance, jaw tight, recognizing the pattern as clearly as tire tracks in wet gravel. The buyer hesitated, asked about timelines, about restoration costs, about why so many projects seemed half-finished, and Mike answered honestly, too honestly perhaps, admitting that things sometimes took longer than planned because doing it right mattered, because shortcuts led to regret, and the buyer nodded but his eyes had already cooled, the spark of interest fading as the weight of uncertainty settled in. And when he finally left with a non-committal promise to think about it, the yard felt quieter, heavier, like it had exhaled a breath it had been holding for years. Avery confronted Mike then, not with anger but with that tired concern that cut deeper, asking him why he couldn't just let one thing go, why every deal had to turn into a crusade, and Mike bristled at first, defending his choices, talking about integrity, about the soul of the work, but as the words echoed back at him he felt their hollowness, because he had said them before, many times, always at moments when reality threatened to intrude, and for a brief, uncomfortable second he wondered if integrity had become an excuse, a shield against admitting that he was afraid to finish, afraid that completion would mean an end to the chase that defined him. The afternoon dragged on, clouds gathering again, and a storm rolled in with the sudden violence Rust Valley was known for, rain hammering metal roofs, turning dust into slick mud, and the crew scrambled to cover what they could, laughing and swearing in equal measure, finding camaraderie in shared chaos, and Mike stood watching the rain wash over the cars, streaks of rust bleeding like old wounds reopened, and he felt a strange mix of guilt and pride, because despite everything this place was still alive, still fighting, and that counted for something, didn't it? Later, as the storm passed and the sun dipped low, casting the yard in gold and shadow, Mike found himself alone by the Camaro again, running a hand along its scarred fender, remembering the first car he ever saved, the one that taught him patience and stubbornness in equal parts, and he realized that Rust Valley wasn't just a business or a collection of mistakes, it was a mirror, reflecting back the parts of himself he refused to change, the habits that comforted him even as they cost him, and the thought unsettled him more than any overdue bill. Avery joined him quietly, neither speaking for a while, the silence saying what words couldn't, and when Avery finally asked him what he really wanted, not what he told himself but what he wanted beneath the noise, Mike didn't answer right away, because the truth hovered just out of reach, tangled up with fear and pride and love for the work, and as night settled over the valley and the yard lights flickered on, illuminating the same old rows of cars waiting for decisions, Mike knew that tomorrow would offer another chance to choose differently, but also that tomorrow had offered that chance before, many times, and he wondered whether recognizing the pattern was enough to break it, or whether he was destined to keep making the same mistakes until Rust Valley itself forced his hand. the next morning arrived without ceremony, a pale sun pushing through low clouds as if reluctant to witness another day of unfinished business, and Mike Hall woke before his alarm with the familiar knot in his stomach, the residue of yesterday's conversation with Avery still clinging to him like the smell of oil on his hands, because the question Avery had asked, simple and direct, had refused to fade during the night, looping through Mike's thoughts as he lay staring at the ceiling, and when he finally swung his legs out of bed he already felt tired, not from lack of sleep but from the weight of choices deferred for too long. The drive to Russ Valley was quiet, the road damp from overnight rain, and as Mike passed the gate he noticed how the yard looked different in the early light, less romantic, more exposed, every car plainly visible, every half-finished promise lined up without shadows to soften the truth, and for a moment he considered turning around, taking a day off, but the idea felt like another kind of avoidance, so he parked and stepped out, breathing in the cold air as if it might clear his head. Inside the shop, the crew trickled in one by one, boots echoing on concrete, coffee cups in hand, and there was a subtle shift in their energy, a cautious expectancy, because everyone could sense that something was coming to a head, even if no one could name it yet, and Mike felt that awareness like a spotlight he hadn't asked for, every glance reminding him that leadership wasn't just about vision but about accountability, about decisions that affected more than his own sense of purpose. Avery arrived shortly after, quieter than usual, his greeting brief, and they exchanged a look that acknowledged unfinished business without reopening it, both men choosing, for now, to let the day unfold before returning to hard conversations. Work began as it always did, sparks flying, metal screaming under grinders, the shop alive with motion, but Mike found it harder to lose himself in the rhythm, his mind drifting back to the ledger Avery had shown him, the numbers that told a story of shrinking margins and growing risk, and as he welded a patch panel he caught himself calculating hours, costs, resale values, thoughts he usually pushed aside in favor of intuition and gut feeling, and the intrusion made him uneasy, as if thinking too much about money threatened to drain the soul from the work. Mid-morning brought an unexpected visitor, a local collector known for quick deals and little patience, and Avery intercepted him at the office while Mike watched through the shop window, his heart rate picking up despite himself, because this was exactly the kind of opportunity they needed, the kind that could stabilize things if handled right, and as Avery gestured toward a short list of cars clearly marked for sale, Mike felt a flicker of pride, evidence that some planning had happened, that they weren't completely adrift. When Mike joined them, he forced himself to stick to the plan, talking up the value without wandering into side stories, resisting the urge to mention other cars not on the list, and for a while it worked, the collector nodding, asking practical questions, and Avery's posture relaxed just a little, hope creeping in through the cracks. But then they reached the edge of the yard where a long-forgotten 50s pickup sat under a tarp, a relic Mike had pulled in years ago on a whim, and the collector paused, curiosity sparked, asking about it, and Mike felt the old reflex surge, the storyteller in him leaping forward, describing the truck's history, its potential, the way it could shine again with enough time and care, and even as Avery shot him a warning look Mike couldn't stop himself, the words spilling out like confession and seduction combined, and he saw the collector's interest shift, not toward buying but toward bargaining, toward exploiting the uncertainty that always followed Mike's enthusiasm. The deal unraveled quickly after that, numbers dropping, conditions multiplying, until Avery stepped in and politely ended the discussion, the collector leaving with a shrug and a promise to call that both men knew meant nothing, and as the dust settled an uncomfortable silence hung in the yard, heavier than any argument. Avery didn't explode, didn't raise his voice, which somehow made it worse, because disappointment delivered quietly cut deeper, and he told Mike that this was exactly what he meant, that every time they got close Mike found a way to complicate it, to chase possibility instead of closing reality, and Mike snapped back at first, defensive, accusing Avery of wanting to strip the place down to nothing, to turn Russ Valley into just another lot flipping cars without heart, but even as he spoke he heard the exaggeration in his own voice, the fear underneath, and the argument fizzled out into a stalemate that left both men unsatisfied. The afternoon dragged, tension seeping into every interaction, the crew working but quieter now, glances exchanged, jokes falling flat, because when leadership wavered, uncertainty spread, and Mike felt the responsibility of that more acutely than ever, realizing that his internal struggle was no longer his alone, that it radiated outward, shaping the mood and morale of the entire operation. To clear his head, he took a walk through the far end of the property where cars sat untouched for years, nature slowly reclaiming them, moss creeping over chrome, trees growing through engine bays, and there, away from the noise, he felt a strange calm, a reminder that time moved forward regardless of his intentions, that Russ was patient and inevitable, and he wondered whether his fight against it was heroic or foolish, whether holding on was an act of defiance or simply denial dressed up as passion. Memories surfaced uninvited, of earlier days when the yard was smaller, when every new arrival felt like a victory instead of a burden, when mistakes were easier to absorb because there were fewer people counting on him, and he realized that part of what he missed wasn't just the romance of the work but the simplicity of being answerable only to himself, a luxury long gone. As the sun dipped again and shadows stretched across the valley, Avery found Mike sitting on the tailgate of an old sedan, staring out at the field, and this time the conversation resumed without heat, both men too tired for posturing, and Avery spoke about responsibility, about sustainability, about the reality that loving something meant making hard choices to keep it alive, while Mike listened, really listened, and admitted that he was afraid of what Russ Valley would become if he let go of certain instincts, afraid that compromise would hollow it out, and Avery countered that refusing to change could destroy it entirely, and the truth of that hung between them, undeniable. They talked until the light faded completely, until the yard lights clicked on and insects filled the air with sound, and though no grand resolution emerged, there was a subtle shift, an acknowledgement that something had to give, that repeating the same patterns would only lead to the same endings, and as they parted for the night Mike felt a cautious resolve take shape, fragile but real, the idea that perhaps discipline didn't have to mean betrayal, that choosing differently could be an act of care rather than surrender. Driving home under a sky clearing at last, stars faint but present, Mike considered the weight of tomorrow, knowing that insight alone wasn't enough, that tomorrow would demand action, choices made in the moment when old habits felt safest, and he wondered whether he would recognize that moment when it came, whether he would have the courage to step off the familiar path, or whether Russ Valley, with all its rust and beauty, would once again pull him back into the comfort of the same mistakes. The decision Mike thought he had reached the night before did not arrive with clarity or confidence when morning came, instead it followed him like a shadow as he unlocked the gate to Russ Valley, the yard still quiet, dew clinging to rusted fenders and broken mirrors, and for the first time in years he resisted the urge to walk the roads aimlessly, choosing instead to head straight to the office where Avery's ledgers waited, the pages heavy with truth, and as he sat there alone he felt a strange unease, as if reading numbers instead of metal somehow made him more vulnerable, because numbers had no patience for stories or sentiment, they simply existed, and the longer he stared the clearer it became that every car represented not just potential but a decision deferred, money frozen in place, time leaking away, and he realized with a jolt that Russ Valley was not overwhelmed by bad luck or outside forces but by his own reluctance to draw lines, to say this far and no further. Because lines felt like endings and endings frightened him. When Avery arrived he found Mike still there, ledger open, coffee untouched, and the look they shared carried a new weight, not resolution but recognition, and without ceremony they began to talk, not arguing this time but laying things out plainly, Avery explaining that they needed a hard reset, a clear list of cars to finish, a clear list to sell as is, and a clear list to let go entirely, scrap if necessary. Words that would have felt like heresy to Mike a week ago but now landed with a dull ache instead of rage, because he knew that keeping everything was no longer an option, that choosing nothing was still a choice, one that was bleeding them dry. The crew sensed the shift immediately when the meeting was called, Everyone gathered around as Avery spoke about focus and priorities, his tone firm but respectful, and when Mike followed, admitting openly that he had let too many projects linger, that his passion had sometimes crossed into paralysis, there was a moment of stunned silence, because vulnerability from him was rare, and it changed the air in the room, turning tension into cautious hope, and as they began marking cars with tape, color-coded decisions that felt brutally final, Mike moved with a strange mix of grief and relief, each piece of tape a small surrender and a small act of honesty. Some cars he let go easily, recognizing that their time had passed, that saving them had been more about pride than purpose, but others hit harder, like the Camaro that had haunted him since the beginning, and when Avery suggested it be sold as is, Mike hesitated, his hand hovering, the old arguments flaring, but then he imagined another year passing, another buyer walking away, another promise broken, and he placed the tape himself, the act feeling like a quiet admission that effort alone did not guarantee redemption. Word spread quickly, and by midday the yard buzzed with visitors drawn by rumors of inventory finally moving, buyers of all kinds wandering through with interest sharpened by urgency, and Mike found himself in unfamiliar territory, not pitching dreams but stating terms, not inflating possibilities but setting boundaries, and though it felt awkward at first, like speaking a second language, he noticed something unexpected. People responded to the clarity, deals moved faster, conversations felt cleaner, and Avery watched with cautious optimism as numbers began to align with reality for once. Yet the change was not without cost, because as cars left the yard, flatbeds hauling away pieces of Rust Valley's history, Mike felt a pang with each departure, a sense of loss that surprised him with its intensity, and he had to remind himself repeatedly that memory did not live in metal alone, that letting go did not erase what had been built, but the reassurance felt thin when he stood watching the Camaro roll out, its future uncertain, its chapter with him closed not by triumph but by necessity, and for a moment he wondered if this was what growth felt like, not victory but acceptance. The afternoon brought its own test when a familiar figure appeared at the gate, a man known for bringing Mike tempting projects at just the wrong time, and as he pulled back a tarp to reveal a rare, deeply rusted coupe, Mike felt the old spark ignite, the itch to rescue, to prove that not all miracles were exhausted, and the man talked price and potential with practiced ease, pushing all the right buttons, and Mike felt himself leaning in, already imagining solutions, and then he caught Avery's. Saw the quiet question there, not judgment but trust, and something shifted, because this time the choice was clear, start even, and Mike stepped back, thanked the man, and said no, the word awkward and heavy but undeniable, and as the truck drove away Mike felt a rush of adrenaline mixed with grief, the realization that restraint required as much courage as ambition. The crew noticed too, murmurs spreading, and for the rest of the day there was a subtle lightness in the shop, work moving forward without the constant dread of new distractions, and as evening approached Mike walked the yard again, this time not aimlessly but deliberately, counting empty spaces, imagining them staying empty, imagining a Rust Valley that was smaller but steadier, less cluttered but more honest, and the vision unsettled him even as it intrigued him, because it demanded a different identity, one built on completion rather than accumulation. Alone by the fence line, he thought about the pattern that had defined him for so long, the way he equated saving with worth, how every rusted car felt like a reflection of himself, flawed but full of potential, and he wondered whether his reluctance to let go was really about the cars at all or about a deeper fear of being ordinary once the chaos was stripped away, because Rust Valley's messiness had always been proof of his uniqueness, his refusal to conform, and choosing discipline felt dangerously close to choosing normalcy. Avery joined him as the sky darkened, and they talked about the day, about the sales that went well and the ones that didn't, about the tension that remained, because change, they both knew, was not a switch but a process, and Avery reminded him gently that one good day did not erase years of habit, that tomorrow would test him again, and Mike nodded, understanding that this was not a transformation story with a clean arc but a negotiation he would have to renew daily. As night settled over Rust Valley, the yard quieter than it had been in years, Mike locked up with a strange sense of exhaustion and clarity intertwined, aware that drawing lines in the rust had cost him something intangible but also given him space to breathe, and driving home he thought about the future not as a grand vision but as a series of small refusals and commitments, moments where the familiar urge would rise and he would have to choose whether to indulge it or step past it, and he did not pretend to know how many times he would fail before succeeding, only that for the first time he could see the lines clearly, etched not in metal but in himself, and that recognition, fragile and unfinished, felt like the most honest progress he had made in a long time. Momentum, Mike quickly learned, was a fragile thing, something that could feel solid one moment and dissolve the next, and the morning after the yard had begun to empty arrived with an uneasy calm that made him suspicious, because Rust Valley had never been a place where order came easily or lasted long, and as he unlocked the gate and stepped inside he was struck by how different the space felt, not cleaner exactly, but less crowded, the gaps between cars creating unfamiliar sight lines. Stretches of gravel exposed to the light, and for a split second he felt disoriented, like a man walking through his own house after the furniture had been rearranged without warning. The absence spoke louder than the presence ever had, reminding him of what had left and why, and the awareness followed him as the crew arrived, their reactions mixed, some relieved by the breathing room, others uneasy, because emptiness could mean stability or it could mean decline, depending on how you looked at it. Work began with renewed focus, tasks clearly defined, fewer projects competing for attention, and Mike noticed how quickly things moved when decisions had already been made, how energy that used to be scattered across a dozen half-started restorations now flowed into finishing what remained, and yet alongside that efficiency he felt a persistent tug, and itch at the back of his mind, the reflex to fill the space, to replace what had gone with something new, because emptiness had always felt like failure to him, a sign that he wasn't hustling hard enough, wasn't chasing enough leads, and resisting that instinct took more effort than he expected. Avery, sensing this, stayed close throughout the morning, not hovering but present, redirecting conversations when they drifted toward speculation about new acquisitions, keeping the focus on completion, on delivery, and Mike was grateful and irritated in equal measure, grateful for the support, irritated by how much he needed it, because needing help felt like another admission of weakness, another crack in the image of the self-reliant builder he had cultivated for years. Midday brought a reminder of why restraint mattered when a scheduled pickup arrived for one of the cars marked for immediate sale, the transaction clean and efficient, paperwork signed, money transferred, and as the transporter pulled away Mike felt a small but undeniable satisfaction, the kind that came not from imagining what could be but from seeing what was finished, and the feeling surprised him with its quiet strength, lacking the adrenaline rush of a new project but carrying a steadiness that lingered longer. Still, the valley tested him, as it always did, when a call came in from a contact hinting at a bulk deal, multiple vehicles at a price that would have once sent Mike scrambling for a trailer without asking questions, and as he listened he felt the old excitement bubble up, the promise of volume and possibility lighting up familiar pathways in his mind, and for a moment he considered it seriously, weighing how easily he could justify just one more haul, just one exception, but then he looked out at the yard, at the crew working with clarity he hadn't seen in years, and he felt the resistance rise, uncomfortable but necessary, and he asked questions instead of committing, buying himself time, a small victory that nonetheless left him restless. The afternoon unfolded with steady progress, engines turning over for the first time in months, panels finally aligned, timelines clarified, and the crew's mood lifted perceptibly as tasks crossed from the in-progress column to done, because completion had a morale of its own, feeding confidence in a way endless beginnings never could, and Mike took note of that, storing it away as evidence against his own doubts, proof that discipline didn't automatically kill passion, that it could channel it instead. Yet the internal struggle did not disappear, and later, alone for a moment, Mike walked to the far edge of the property where a few cars still waited for decisions, reminders that not everything could be resolved at once, and he felt a familiar swell of attachment, the urge to linger, to imagine futures for each one, and he had to consciously pull himself back, reminding himself that imagination without action was what had led him here in the first place. Avery joined him again, their conversations now less confrontational and more strategic, talking about timelines, about how to communicate the changes to regular buyers and partners, about managing expectations, and Mike realized how much of Rust Valley's chaos had come not just from his decisions but from his refusal to articulate them clearly, leaving others to fill in the gaps with their own assumptions. And as they spoke, he felt a growing respect for the structure Avery brought, not as a threat to his vision but as a framework that might actually allow it to survive. As the day wore on, resistance took subtler forms, small moments where Mike caught himself romanticizing the past, telling stories about the early days when risk felt lighter and consequences smaller, and he noticed how those stories painted struggle as purity and stability as compromise, and the realization unsettled him, because it suggested that part of him had been invested in chaos as a marker of authenticity. That order felt suspect not because it was wrong but because it challenged his self-image, and confronting that was harder than selling any car. Evening approached with a sense of tired satisfaction, the kind earned through steady effort rather than frantic motion, and as the crew packed up there was more laughter than usual, plans discussed for the next day instead of vague promises, and Mike felt a cautious pride, not the loud kind but the quiet acknowledgement that something had shifted, however slightly. Locking up, he took one last look at the yard, the empty spaces no longer glaring but neutral, full of possibility rather than accusation, and he wondered whether this was how change embedded itself, not through dramatic turning points but through repeated acts of resistance against familiar urges, each one small, each one necessary. Driving home, the valley dark around him, Mike reflected on how momentum and resistance were intertwined, how forward motion required pushing against habits that had once defined him, and he knew that tomorrow would bring new tests, new temptations dressed up as opportunities, because Rust Valley would always attract them, and the question was no longer whether they would appear but whether he would meet them with the same clarity he had managed today, whether the lines he had drawn would hold under pressure, or whether they would blur as they always had before. He did not fool himself into thinking the pattern was broken, only that it had been interrupted, and their interruption, fragile as it was, might be enough to create a different outcome if he chose to defend it, and as he pulled into his driveway he felt the familiar fatigue of a long day, tempered now by a sense of earned direction, aware that momentum was something he would have to protect deliberately, not with grand gestures but with consistency, and that the real challenge ahead was not starting this change but sustaining it when resistance came not from outside but from within, whispering that the old ways were easier, safer, more true to who he was, and he wondered whether he was finally ready to answer that whisper with something stronger than habit. Control, Mike discovered, came with its own cost, one that was less obvious than chaos but no less demanding, and as the fifth day of this new discipline began he felt the strain of vigilance settling into his shoulders, because saying no once was an act of courage but saying no repeatedly required endurance, and Rust Valley, true to its nature, continued to test him at every turn, offering temptations disguised as solutions, problems masquerading as opportunities, and as he unlocked the shop and listened to the familiar echo of his footsteps on concrete he wondered whether he had underestimated how exhausting consistency could be. The crew arrived to find a whiteboard newly filled with timelines and deadlines, Avery's handwriting precise, unforgiving in its clarity, and while no one complained outright there was a subtle resistance in the air, a sense that the structure, though helpful, also felt restrictive to men used to improvisation, and Mike felt caught in the middle, responsible not just for enforcing the plan but for embodying it, because any hint of wavering from him would give permission for the old habits to resurface. Work began smoothly, almost deceptively so, tasks advancing according to schedule, engines buttoned up, interiors reassembled, paint curing under control conditions instead of rushed hope, and Mike felt a quiet satisfaction watching things move forward without last-minute heroics, yet beneath that satisfaction simmered an anxiety he couldn't quite shake, the fear that by tightening his grip he was stifling something essential, that Russ Valley's identity was slipping toward something more predictable, more conventional, and the thought gnawed at him even as evidence of progress mounted around him. Mid-morning brought a call from an auction house, an invitation to consign several vehicles, the kind of exposure that could legitimize their recent changes and move inventory quickly, and as Mike listened he felt the familiar thrill of skill and recognition, imagining Russ Valley's cars under bright lights, bids climbing, validation delivered in hammer strikes, and he nearly agreed on the spot before Avery stepped in, reminding him of fees, logistics, timelines, the unglamorous details that always followed big promises, and the pause that followed was heavy, because Mike could feel the fog in the road clearly, the old instinct to chase visibility versus the new commitment to measured progress. They discussed it at length, weighing risk against reward, and in the end agreed to a limited consignment, a compromise that left Mike uneasy but resolute, because compromise, he was learning, was not defeat but calibration, though it still felt like walking a narrow bridge without rails. The afternoon tested his resolve further when tensions flared in the shop, a disagreement over methods escalating into raised voices, and Mike found himself intervening sooner than he would have in the past, setting boundaries, insisting on process, and the authority in his voice surprised even him, because it carried less bluster and more certainty, and the conflict diffused quickly, leaving behind a residual silence that spoke of adjustment, of people recalibrating their expectations of him as much as he was recalibrating his own. Alone later, Mike reflected on how much of Russ Valley's previous chaos had been enabled by his avoidance of control, his reluctance to assert structure for fear of becoming the villain, and the realization was uncomfortable, because it suggested that his desire to be liked, to be seen as the passionate savior of lost causes, had come at the expense of stability for everyone involved, and accepting that meant accepting responsibility not just for mistakes made but for harm done through inaction. As the day wore on, buyers came and went, transactions completed with increasing efficiency, and Avery's ledger began to show signs of recovery, modest but real, and Mike felt a cautious optimism tempered by realism, because he knew numbers could improve and still fall apart if discipline sleep, and the fragility of progress made him hyper-aware of every decision, every word spoken, every glance that lingered too long on a car not on the list. Evening brought the auction house representative to the yard, walking through selected vehicles, clipboard in hand, and Mike watched himself through a strange internal lens, noting how he described the cars differently now, less myth-making, more fact, less rescue narrative, more craftsmanship, and he wondered whether buyers would respond to this version of Russ Valley, whether authenticity could survive without excess, and the uncertainty left him restless even as the meeting ended on a positive note. As dusk settled, Avery and Mike sat together reviewing the day, the conversation pragmatic, forward-looking, and for a moment Mike felt something like trust in the process, a belief that if he continued to show up this way, to absorb the cost of control without retreating, Russ Valley might finally find a sustainable rhythm, but the feeling was fragile, easily disturbed by memory, by the echo of past thrills that still pulsed faintly in his veins. Driving home, he passed a roadside field where an abandoned car sat half-sunk in grass, and instinctively his eyes lingered, imagination flickering to life, and then he forced himself to look away, the act leaving a hollow ache behind, because restraint, he realized, was not neutral, it extracted a price, a sense of loss that had to be acknowledged rather than denied, and he wondered whether he could continue paying that price without resenting the change it brought. That night, sleep came fitfully, dreams filled with half-finished projects and ticking clocks, and when he woke before dawn he felt both weary and determined, aware that the cost of control was ongoing, cumulative, but also aware that the cause of chaos had nearly broken them, and as he lay there listening to the quiet he accepted, not without regret, that there was no path forward that didn't require sacrifice, That the question was no longer whether to pay but what he was willing to pay for. And whether the version of Rust Valley he was building now, steadier, more constrained, but alive, was worth letting go of the man who had thrived in disorder, and as the first light crept in he resolved to keep choosing this path for another day, knowing that the real test was not surviving a crisis but enduring the long, unglamorous stretch afterward where commitment was proven not by dramatic gestures but by the quiet, repetitive act of holding the line. The sixth morning began with an unexpected stillness that felt heavier than noise, the kind of quiet that carried intention rather than absence, and as Mike walked into Rust Valley he sensed it immediately, the yard holding its breath, the air cool and sharp, every sound amplified by the lack of distraction, and for a fleeting moment he missed the chaos, missed the overlapping conversations, the constant interruptions, the feeling that something was always happening even if nothing was finishing, because stillness demanded attention, demanded that he confront what remained when movement stopped. He moved slowly through the shop, touching nothing at first, just observing, noting how the workbenches were clearer, how tools rested where they belonged, how projects had names and timelines instead of vague futures, and the order unsettled him in a way he had not fully anticipated, because it stripped away excuses, leaving no place to hide from responsibility or self-deception. Avery arrived shortly after, carrying printouts and a laptop instead of loose papers, and they sat together going over projections, not dreams this time but scenarios, conservative estimates, worst cases, and as Mike listened he felt an odd mixture of pride and grief, pride that Rust Valley was finally being treated like something meant to last, grief that the wild, reckless version of it was fading into memory, and he wondered whether that grief would ever fully disappear or whether it was simply the price of maturation, a lingering ache that accompanied growth. The crew gathered for a brief meeting, and Mike laid out new rules clearly, boundaries around scope creep, around timelines, around acquisitions, and as he spoke he felt the weight of every word, because rules spoken by him carried history, the knowledge that he had broken his own promises before, and he saw skepticism in a few faces, cautious acceptance in others, and he didn't blame them, knowing trust would have to be rebuilt not with speeches but with consistency over time. Work resumed with focus, but tension lingered beneath the surface, because rules always surface resistance, especially in a place built on improvisation, and Mike noticed small acts of testing, questions framed as hypotheticals, suggestions that nudged against the edges of the new structure, and each time he felt the urge to bend, to accommodate, to prove he was still the same guy, and each time he forced himself to pause, to respond deliberately rather than instinctively, learning in real time how different leadership felt when it wasn't fueled by impulse. Midday brought an unwelcome surprise when a former associate showed up unannounced, a man from Mike's past who represented everything Rust Valley used to be, opportunistic, charismatic, always chasing the next big score, and the sight of him stirred old instincts instantly, memories of fast deals and shared risks flooding back, and as they talked the man painted a picture of a lucrative opportunity just out of reach, a collection of rare cars available cheaply if Mike would just move quickly. Trust his gut like he used to, and the temptation hit hard, because it came wrapped in familiarity, in nostalgia, in the reassurance of old identity. Avery watched from a distance, saying nothing, and Mike felt the weight of choice settle heavily on him, because this wasn't just about money or cars, it was about who he was becoming versus who he had been, and as the conversation unfolded he found himself asking different questions than he would have before, slower questions, probing ones, and the more he asked the clearer the cracks became in the story, the risks downplayed, the timelines vague, the promises inflated, and when Mike finally declined, firmly and without apology, the man laughed it off, masking disappointment with bravado, but as he left Mike felt a tremor run through him, not relief but sadness, because refusing the deal also meant refusing a piece of his past, acknowledging that some relationships only made sense within the chaos he was trying to leave behind. The afternoon passed in a reflective haze, work continuing steadily, but Mike's thoughts circling around the encounter, around how easily he could have slipped back into old patterns if the timing had been different, if the yard had been fuller, if the pressure had been higher, and the realization frightened him, because it revealed how thin the line still was, how discipline was not a permanent state but an active practice, vulnerable to erosion if neglected even briefly. As the sun dipped lower, Mike found himself alone again, standing near the fence where the valley stretched out quiet and indifferent, and memories rose unbidden, of deals won and lost, of nights spent chasing paths across provinces, of the thrill of pulling something impossible back from the brink, and he acknowledged, for once without romanticizing it, that those moments had shaped him but did not have to define his future, that honoring the past did not require living inside it. Avery joined him, and they talked about the visitor, about how ghosts had a way of resurfacing when change threatened, and Avery reminded him that setting new rules wasn't just about external order but about internal boundaries, about deciding which voices deserve influence and which needed to fade, and Mike listened, grateful for the perspective, aware that without someone like Avery he might already have compromised more than he realized. Evening settled with a sense of quiet resolve, the yard lights flickering on, illuminating a Russ Valley that felt leaner, more deliberate, and Mike walked through it slowly, noticing how the space felt less like a battlefield and more like a workshop again, a place of craft rather than accumulation, and though the absence of excess still ached, there was also a sense of intention he had never fully experienced before. Locking up, he paused longer than usual, keys in hand, listening to the night sounds, and he thought about how rules were often seen as limitations, but in this moment they felt like protection, fragile lines drawn not to restrict but to preserve, and he understood, finally, that the ghosts of old habits would continue to appear, that temptation would always arrive disguised as opportunity, but that each refusal strengthened something new, something quieter and more resilient. Driving home, he felt a cautious confidence take root, not the loud certainty of past victories but a grounded assurance born of restraint, and he accepted that the path ahead would not offer the same highs, the same stories, the same adrenaline, but it might offer something he had long chased without naming, stability without stagnation, purpose without chaos, and as he pulled into his driveway he knew that tomorrow would bring its own tests, its own ghosts, and that his task was not to banish them entirely but to meet them with the rules he was learning to trust, rules etched not on paper but in repeated choices, and for the first time he felt that those choices, though difficult, were beginning to align with the future he wanted rather than the past he knew. Proof had always mattered to Mike more than he admitted, not proof in the sense of numbers neatly balanced or contracts signed, but proof that his way, the messy, instinct-driven, emotionally charged way he had built Russ Valley, still had value in a world that increasingly demanded predictability, and as the seventh chapter of this uneasy transformation unfolded, that need for proof surfaced in subtler, more dangerous ways, because it no longer screamed for attention, it whispered, suggesting not recklessness but validation, the desire to demonstrate that discipline and passion could coexist without one devouring the other. The day began with a sense of anticipation that Mike couldn't quite place, a low hum under the usual routine, and as he walked the yard he noticed how his eyes lingered not on the cars marked for sale or completion, but on the reactions of people around him, the crew, the buyers, even Avery, searching unconsciously for signs that the changes were being noticed, appreciated, justified. The morning meeting was efficient, almost clinical, timelines reviewed, tasks assigned, no rambling stories, no last-minute pivots, and while the efficiency was undeniable, Mike felt a faint hollowness afterward, like finishing a song without the chorus, and he had to remind himself that effectiveness was not meant to be entertaining, that leadership was not a performance even if part of him still craved applause. Mid-morning brought a test disguised as opportunity when a serious buyer arrived unannounced, a collector with reputation and resources, the kind of person whose interest could serve as external confirmation that Russ Valley was still relevant, still respected, and as Mike shook his hand he felt the familiar surge of energy, the instinct to impress, to show rather than tell, and as they walked the yard Mike found himself navigating a delicate balance, sticking to facts, to finished work, while resisting the urge to unveil hidden gems, to hint at secret stashes and untapped potential that had once been his trademark. The buyer asked sharp questions about process, about consistency, about whether Rust Valley could deliver at scale without sacrificing quality, and Mike answered carefully, honestly, and as the conversation unfolded he realized how much he wanted this deal, not for the money, though that mattered, but for what it symbolized, acceptance from the very world he had long positioned himself against, and the realization made him uneasy, because chasing approval, even sophisticated approval, was just another form of temptation. Avery joined them at the right moments, grounding the discussion, reinforcing structure, and together they presented a version of Rust Valley that felt both true and restrained, and when the buyer left with a clear intention to move forward on specific terms, Mike felt a rush of satisfaction quickly followed by anxiety, because now the stakes were higher, expectations sharper, and failure more visible, and the thought of failing under this new, disciplined model felt more threatening than failing amid chaos ever had. The afternoon stretched long, filled with focused labor, and Mike threw himself into the work, hands-on in a way he hadn't been in days, partly out of habit, partly out of a need to reconnect with the tactile certainty of metal and tools, because physical work had always been his refuge when abstract pressures mounted, and as he worked he noticed how the crew responded differently now, less tentative, more aligned, their confidence growing as systems held, and the sight filled him with pride. Tempered by a strange displacement, because the success no longer revolved solely around him, around his intuition and last-minute saves, but around a collective rhythm that did not require his constant intervention. That realization was both comforting and unsettling, because it suggested that Rust Valley could function without his chaos, perhaps even without his constant presence, and the thought brushed against a deeper fear, one he rarely acknowledged, that his identity was too entwined with being indispensable, with being the one who could always swoop in and fix what others couldn't, and that by building systems he was quietly making himself less central. Later in the day, proof tempted him again in a different form, when a small but meaningful mistake surfaced, a part delayed, a schedule slipping slightly, nothing catastrophic but enough to draw attention, and Mike felt the old impulse to override the process, to personally solve it in dramatic fashion, to show that instinct could still outperform planning, and for a few tense minutes he hovered on the edge of intervention, weighing how easily he could step in and restore order instantly, and how satisfying that would feel, but then he stepped back, allowed the system to absorb the disruption, watched as the crew adjusted, communicated, adapted, and though it took longer, the solution held, and the quiet effectiveness of it left him with a mix of relief and melancholy, because the proof he had always sought arrived not through heroics but through patience, and it forced him to confront how much of his past behavior had been driven by the need to be seen as exceptional. As evening approached, the buyer called back, confirming interest, outlining next steps, and Mike hung up feeling both validated and exposed, because success under scrutiny demanded consistency, demanded that he live up to the version of Rust Valley he had presented, and there would be no hiding behind improvisation if things went wrong. Avery sensed his mood and suggested a walk, and together they moved through the quieting yard, talking not about deals or deadlines but about identity, about how businesses outgrew their founders' egos if allowed, and Avery spoke candidly about his own fears, about the temptation to control too tightly, to measure everything until nothing breathed, and Mike listened, recognizing that they were both navigating different sides of the same tension, learning where to loosen and where to hold. Night fell with a heavy sky, stars obscured, the yard lights casting long shadows that made the remaining cars look like silhouettes rather than objects, and Mike stood there absorbing the scene, thinking about proof again, about how he had once equated it with risk and spectacle, and how now it seemed to reside in endurance, in the ability to repeat good decisions without applause, and the shift felt profound and uncomfortable, like learning a new language late in life. Driving home, he replayed the day, the near misses, the quiet wins, the moments where temptation had arrived not as chaos but as validation, and he realized how dangerous that form of temptation could be, because it rewarded discipline while still feeding ego. And he understood that the next phase of his struggle would not be about resisting obvious mistakes but about resisting the urge to use success as justification to bend rules again, to prove, once more, that he was special. As he pulled into his driveway, the engine ticking as it cooled, he accepted that proof, real proof, would not come from a single buyer or a strong month or public recognition, but from longevity, from whether Rust Valley could sustain this version of itself long after the novelty wore off, long after the story stopped being interesting, and the thought both humbled and steadied him, because it reframed success not as a moment but as a practice, something earned slowly, invisibly, true. Restraint repeated until it became instinct. He went inside carrying that thought with him, knowing that tomorrow would bring new chances to seek proof the old way, and that his task would be to recognize those chances for what they were, not opportunities but tests, subtle ones, designed not to destroy him outright but to lure him gently back toward the habits that once defined him, and as he prepared for sleep he resolved, quietly and without ceremony, to let proof come later, if it came at all, trusting that the work itself, done consistently and without spectacle, was enough for now. Silence began to take on a different meaning at Rust Valley, no longer just the absence of noise between machines or the lull after engines shut down, but a presence in itself, something Mike became increasingly aware of as the days followed a steadier rhythm, because where chaos once filled every gap with urgency and distraction, there was now space, and in that space lived questions he could no longer drown out with motion. The morning fog rolled in thick and slow, wrapping the yard in a muted grey that softened the outlines of the cars, and as Mike walked through it he felt as though he were moving inside his own thoughts, each shape emerging only when he was close enough to confront it, and the quiet pressed on him, not accusingly but insistently, asking him who he was when he wasn't reacting, rescuing, improvising. The crew arrived and went about their work with calm efficiency, fewer words exchanged, gestures practiced and purposeful, and Mike noticed how little they needed from him now, how rarely someone looked his way for approval or direction, and while part of him felt relief at this independence, another part felt strangely diminished, as though his relevance was slowly eroding with every smoothly executed task that did not require his intervention. He reminded himself that this was the goal, that leadership was meant to enable rather than dominate, but understanding it intellectually did not fully blunt the emotional sting, because Rust Valley had been built as an extension of his personality, loud, restless, uncompromising, and watching it function without those traits felt like watching a child grow into someone unfamiliar. Mid-morning brought a long-planned negotiation with a regional buyer, a meeting that would once have been dominated by bravado and storytelling, but now unfolded in measured tones, facts laid out cleanly, expectations clearly defined, and as Mike listened more than he spoke he felt a subtle shift inside himself, a recognition that silence, when chosen rather than imposed, could be a form of strength, that not filling every pause allowed others to reveal their priorities, their concerns, their limits, and the deal that emerged was fair, unglamorous, and solid, lacking the thrill of conquest but offering something far rarer in his experience, mutual confidence. After the buyer left, Avery commented on how different the conversation had felt, how much more balanced, and Mike nodded, acknowledging that the hardest part had been resisting the urge to fill the space with reassurance, to oversell, to control the narrative, because silence forced him to trust that what they were offering was enough without embellishment, and that trust felt both empowering and terrifying. As the day wore on, the silence continued to speak in other ways, surfacing old doubts during routine moments, like when Mike found himself alone in the shop at lunch, the radio off, the smell of metal and oil hanging in the air, and memories crept in of earlier years when the place buzzed constantly, when noise equaled life and quiet felt like failure, and he wondered whether his discomfort now was less about loss and more about withdrawal, the aftereffects of stepping away from an addiction. To urgency. The afternoon presented a subtle challenge when a minor setback occurred, a supplier delay that threatened a tight timeline, and the crew handled it competently, adjusting schedules, communicating options, but Mike felt a familiar itch to intervene, to take control, and as he stood there watching he realized how deeply ingrained his reflex to fix had become, how silence in the face of a problem felt like neglect even when action was unnecessary, and forcing himself to remain quiet, to let the system work, took more effort than stepping in ever had. Later, as shadows lengthened, a call came from a former customer who had followed Rust Valley's earlier exploits closely, someone drawn to the legend more than the product, and as Mike listened to the man reminisce about past deals, about wild rescues and impossible turnarounds, he felt the pull of nostalgia tighten, because the stories still sounded good, still carried a sense of daring and defiance, and for a moment he was tempted to slip back into that version of himself, to reassure the caller that the old Rust Valley was still alive and kicking, but instead he spoke honestly about the changes, about focus and finish, about fewer miracles and more reliability, and the pause that followed was long and revealing, the silence on the line signaling disappointment, and when the call ended Mike sat there for a while, absorbing the quiet aftermath, realizing that choosing this path meant accepting that some people would lose interest, that not every admirer of chaos would stay for the discipline, and that loss of audience, however small, carried its own sting. Avery joined him near the end of the day, sensing the weight in his posture, and they talked about how silence functioned differently depending on context, how it could be a void or a boundary, an absence or a container, and Avery pointed out that Rust Valley's earlier noise had often masked uncertainty rather than solved it, that constant motion had been a way of avoiding stillness because stillness demanded honesty, and Mike recognized the truth in that, recognizing too how often he had equated being busy with being right. As night settled, the yard lights came on one by one, casting steady pools of illumination that left large areas in shadow, and Mike walked through them slowly, noticing how the quiet allowed him to hear details he had long ignored, the wind moving through trees at the edge of the property, the distant hum of the highway, the faint ticking of cooling engines, sounds that had always been there but drowned out by his own urgency, and in that awareness he felt a strange calm, not satisfaction exactly, but acceptance, the sense that this quieter version of Rust Valley, and of himself, might be less exciting but more sustainable. Driving home, he reflected on how silence had become a teacher rather than an enemy, showing him where his impulses lay bare, where his need for validation still lingered, and where his commitment was strongest, because silence did not argue or persuade, it simply revealed, and what it revealed was a man still learning how to exist without constant proof, without constant noise, without the adrenaline that had once defined his sense of worth. That night, lying awake, he noticed how the quiet of his own house mirrored the quiet of the yard, and instead of fighting it he let it settle, acknowledging the discomfort and the clarity it brought, understanding that this phase of his journey was not about dramatic breakthroughs but about learning to listen, to himself, to others, to the space between actions, because in that space lay the difference between repeating the same mistakes and finally outgrowing them, and as sleep eventually took him he accepted that silence, though unsettling, was speaking more truth to him now than noise ever had, and that listening to it might be the most important discipline of all. Pressure did not arrive at Rust Valley like a sudden storm but like water seeping slowly through cracks, quiet at first, almost unnoticeable, until one day Mike realized he was carrying it in his chest, in the way his jaw tightened during conversations, in how he measured his words more carefully than before, because with stability came scrutiny, and with scrutiny came expectations that were less forgiving than chaos had ever been. The morning began under steady rain, not dramatic, just persistent, drumming against metal roofs and turning the yard into a patchwork of mud and reflection, and as Mike walked across it he felt that the valley itself was testing him again, reminding him that progress did not mean immunity from difficulty, only a different kind of challenge. Inside the office, Avery was already on the phone, voice low, deliberate, and when he hung up he looked at Mike with an expression that carried neither panic nor optimism but realism, explaining that a key buyer was pushing back on timelines, concerned that the new, more disciplined Rust Valley might still carry the risk of the old one beneath the surface, and the words stung more than Mike expected, because they cut to the core of his fear, that no matter how much he changed, the past would always speak louder than the present. The day unfolded under that tension, the crew working steadily but aware that something was hovering, a sense that their recent progress was being quietly evaluated by forces beyond the yacht, and Mike felt the weight of representation settle on him, realizing that every decision now functioned not just as an internal choice but as evidence, reinforcing or undermining the narrative they were trying to build. Mid-morning brought a difficult conversation with a supplier, one that required firmness rather than accommodation, and Mike handled it with controlled resolve, setting boundaries, insisting on accountability, and when the call ended he noticed his hands shaking slightly, not from fear but from the unfamiliarity of standing his ground without raising his voice or resorting to charm, because this kind of authority demanded calm rather than dominance, and calm required emotional restraint he was still learning to sustain. The pressure intensified when a minor error surfaced in documentation, a small discrepancy that in the past might have been shrugged off or patched quietly, but now threatened to erode trust if not addressed transparently, and as Avery laid out the implications, Mike felt a flash of irritation, the old instinct to minimize, to smooth over, to move on quickly, but he forced himself to confront it directly, contacting the buyer, explaining the issue, offering solutions, and the conversation was uncomfortable, exposing vulnerability he had long avoided, yet when it ended on cautious acceptance rather than collapse, he felt a different kind of relief, the kind that came from surviving honesty rather than escaping it. Throughout the afternoon, the rain continued, trapping everyone inside the shop, amplifying sounds and moods, and Mike noticed how pressure affected people differently, some retreating into focus, others growing terse, and he recognized his role not as a savior swooping in but as a stabilizing presence, absorbing tension without transmitting it, a role that felt heavier than chaos ever had, because it required him to manage not just outcomes but emotional currents, his own included. Late in the day, a disagreement arose between Avery and a longtime partner over strategy, the kind of disagreement that in the past Mike might have sidestepped or diffused with humor, but now demanded a decision, and as the discussion sharpened, Mike felt the familiar temptation to delay, to postpone resolution until the pressure dissipated, but he resisted, listening carefully, weighing perspectives, and making a clear call that inevitably disappointed one side, and as the room fell quiet. Afterward he felt the weight of that choice settle in, understanding that leadership under pressure meant accepting that clarity often came at the cost of universal approval. The rain finally eased as evening approached, leaving the yacht sleek and reflective, and Mike stepped outside alone, breathing in the damp air, watching water pool around tire tracks that told stories of movement and departure, and he thought about how pressure revealed fault lines, how it exposed where systems were weak and where convictions wavered, and he wondered whether this was the true test he had been unconsciously avoiding, not the excitement of change but the endurance of scrutiny. The sustained effort of proving reliability over time. Avery joined him, and they spoke candidly about the day, about how pressure was inevitable once Rust Valley began to stabilize, because stability attracted attention, and attention demanded consistency, and Avery pointed out that chaos had once shielded them from this kind of evaluation, that unpredictability had been a form of camouflage, and Mike recognized the truth in that, realizing that by choosing order he had chosen visibility, and visibility came with accountability that could not be negotiated away. As darkness settled, the yard lights reflected off wet metal, creating a subdued glow that felt both somber and grounded, and Mike walked through the space, noting how the cars looked less like abandoned dreams and more like inventory with purpose, and the shift reassured him, even as the pressure lingered, because it suggested that the work they were doing was real, measurable, and therefore subject to real consequences. Driving home through slick roads, Mike replayed the moments of the day where pressure had peaked, noticing how each one had tempted him toward familiar escapes, deflection, charm, avoidance, and how resisting those impulses had left him drained but intact, and he understood that pressure was not the enemy he had once believed it to be, but a diagnostic tool, revealing whether the changes he was making could hold under stress or whether they were merely cosmetic. That night, exhaustion settled deep, not the satisfying fatigue of physical labor but the heavier tiredness of sustained emotional engagement, and as he lay awake he acknowledged that this phase of his journey would not offer clear victories or dramatic turning points, only ongoing evaluation, a constant testing of resolve, and he wondered whether he was prepared to live in that space indefinitely, where success was quiet and failure more visible than ever. As sleep finally came, he accepted that pressure was now part of the landscape, as much a feature of Rust Valley as Rust itself, and that learning to operate within it, without retreating into old patterns or hardening into rigidity, would determine whether the changes he had fought for would endure or collapse, and that realization, heavy and sobering, marked another step away from the comfort of repetition and toward a future defined not by the absence of mistakes but by the willingness to confront them openly when they surfaced. Responsibility, Mike was learning, did not announce itself with authority or certainty but settled gradually into the body, altering posture, breath, and instinct until even simple decisions carried an unfamiliar weight, and the tense stretch of this journey began with a sunrise that felt deceptively gentle, pale light spreading across Rust Valley as if offering reassurance it had no obligation to keep. Mike arrived earlier than he needed to, unlocking the gate and standing still for a long moment before entering, because the habit of preparation had replaced the habit of reaction, and though that change was deliberate it still felt strange, like wearing a new set of boots that hadn't yet molded to his feet. The yard looked orderly in a way that would once have unsettled him, cars aligned by status rather than by chance, space left intentionally empty, and as he walked through it he realized that responsibility had begun to give shape to the place, defining not just what was done but what was left undone on purpose, and that distinction, subtle but profound, marked a turning point he hadn't fully acknowledged. Inside the office, paperwork waited, contracts, timelines, obligations written down in ink rather than implied through handshakes and shared risk, and Mike sat with them longer than usual, reading carefully, noticing how responsibility now lived in these documents as much as in the yard itself, binding future actions to present commitments, and the permanence of that connection made him uneasy, because it removed the escape routes he had relied on for years, the flexibility to pivot, to reinterpret, to walk away from promises that no longer suited him. Avery arrived with quiet efficiency, and together they reviewed the week ahead, not as a loose outline but as a sequence of deliverables, each one dependent on the last, and Mike felt the cumulative weight of it, understanding that responsibility compounded, that every fulfilled obligation created the expectation of the next, and there was no dramatic release, no finish line where the burden lifted entirely. The crew followed, settling into their routines with a focus that felt earned rather than forced, and Mike observed how his role had shifted again, less about directing hands-on work and more about maintaining the conditions under which others could do theirs well, and while that distance sometimes felt like loss, it also brought a deeper awareness of interconnectedness, how a decision made in the office rippled outward into the shop, the yard, the ledger, the reputation, and how accountability flowed both ways. Mid-morning brought a moment that crystallized this new reality when a small mistake by one of the crew threatened to delay a delivery, and instead of frustration or blame, Mike found himself responding with measured inquiry, seeking understanding rather than release, and as they worked through the correction together he noticed how the absence of drama accelerated resolution, how responsibility shared openly created momentum instead of paralysis, and the experience left him reflective, realizing how often in the past his own volatility had complicated problems that were already solvable. The day carried on with steady intensity, meetings punctuated by focused labor, decisions made without flourish, and Mike felt the quiet accumulation of trust building around him, not the charismatic trust of belief in miracles but the steadier confidence that came from predictability, and while part of him missed the exhilaration of being underestimated and then proving everyone wrong, another part recognized the relief of not having to perform heroics simply to justify his place. In the afternoon, a call came from a buyer confirming a major commitment, the kind that would have once sent Mike into celebratory mode, plans spinning outward immediately. But now he absorbed the news with cautious satisfaction, acknowledging it as validation not of brilliance but of consistency, and the muted response surprised him, because it revealed how deeply his priorities had shifted, how success now felt like confirmation of process rather than personal triumph. Later, alone in the shop, Mike reflected on how responsibility had reshaped his relationship with time, compressing the present with the future, making every shortcut more expensive, every delay more visible, and he recognized how much of his earlier behavior had been driven by a desire to outrun consequences rather than confront them, a strategy that worked only as long as no one demanded continuity. As evening approached, Avery and Mike reviewed the day's outcomes, the conversation brief and precise, and in that brevity Mike sensed mutual respect solidifying, no longer anchored in shared risk-taking but in shared accountability, and he realized how rare that was in his past, how many partnerships had been built on momentum alone and collapsed when momentum faltered. Walking the yard at dusk, Mike felt the valley settle around him, the sounds familiar yet less overwhelming, and he considered how responsibility had given form not just to Russ Valley but to his own identity, replacing the self-image of a lone savior with something less dramatic but more durable, a steward, a custodian of effort and expectation, and while the role felt heavier, it also felt more honest. Driving home, he thought about how responsibility did not erase temptation or doubt but reframed them, turning each impulse into a question of impact rather than desire, and he acknowledged that this reframing required constant attention, because fatigue could dull vigilance, and comfort could invite complacency, and the same mistakes could reappear under new disguises if he allowed himself to believe the work was done. That night, sitting quietly, he accepted that responsibility had a shape, one he was still learning to inhabit, defined by repetition, by follow-through, by the willingness to be accountable even when no one was watching, and he understood that this shape, though less exciting than chaos, offered something he had long sought without realizing it, a sense of alignment between intention and outcome, between who he believed himself to be and how he actually behaved. As sleep approached, he knew that tomorrow would bring new demands, new pressures, and new opportunities to either reinforce or undermine this fragile structure, and he resolved to meet them not with bravado or fear but with the steady presence responsibility required, aware that the true measure of change lay not in moments of crisis but in ordinary days handled consistently, and that if Russ Valley was to avoid repeating the same mistakes, it would be because those ordinary days, stacked quietly together, had finally reshaped the man at its center. Quiet had become the most unsettling sound at Russ Valley, not the peaceful silence of rest but the heavy stillness that followed routine. When machines were off, conversations ended, and there was nothing left to distract Mike from the steady accumulation of consequence, and this 11th phase unfolded under that kind of quiet, stretching across days that looked uneventful from the outside yet pressed inward with a persistent gravity. Winter edged closer, frost appearing along the frames of forgotten cars, the air sharper, less forgiving, and Mike felt how the season mirrored his internal state, stripping things down, exposing what remained when momentum slowed. He arrived before dawn more often now, unlocking the gate while the valley was still wrapped in fog, the yard emerging gradually as light strengthened, and during those moments he felt the full weight of responsibility without the buffer of activity, understanding that quiet did not mean rest but accountability waiting patiently for acknowledgement. Inside the office, the systems they had built continued to function, invoices processed, schedules updated, communications logged, and that reliability should have brought comfort, yet it also removed excuses, because when everything worked as intended there was nowhere to hide from the simple truth of performance. Avery noticed the shift in Mike's demeanor, the way his humor had softened into something more restrained, and during a brief conversation he remarked that this stage was often the hardest, the part where change stopped feeling heroic and started feeling permanent, and Mike absorbed the comment in silence, recognizing its accuracy, because permanence demanded endurance rather than inspiration. The crew worked steadily, aware of expectations now clearly defined, and Mike observed how the quiet affected them differently, some thriving in predictability, others struggling without the adrenaline of last-minute saves, and he saw in them reflections of his own history, recognizing the versions of himself that had once fed on chaos to feel alive. Midday brought a small but telling challenge when an unexpected delay threatened to disrupt the week's plan, and the response was efficient, almost mundane, solutions identified, adjustments made, and as the situation resolved without drama, Mike felt a strange emptiness, realizing how much of his past satisfaction had been tied to crisis, to being the one who stepped in when everything else failed. The emptiness lingered, raising uncomfortable questions about identity, about whether he knew how to define himself outside of conflict, and the quiet forced him to confront those questions without distraction. In the afternoon, he spent time alone in the shop, hands resting on cold metal, tracing lines of rust and repair, and he reflected on how each car represented a narrative of neglect and intention, of damage accumulated gradually rather than suddenly, and he saw parallels everywhere, in business, in relationships, in himself, understanding that the most significant failures were rarely dramatic collapses but slow drifts enabled by inattention. Avery joined him later, and they spoke about long-term vision, about sustainability rather than expansion, about resisting the urge to chase growth for its own sake, and Mike recognized how counterintuitive that restraint felt after years of scrambling to survive, yet he also saw its necessity, because repeating old mistakes did not always look like recklessness, sometimes it looked like ambition unexamined. As daylight faded early, the yard lights flickered on, illuminating rows of cars now arranged with intention, and Mike walked among them, feeling both pride and distance, because the place no longer mirrored his internal chaos, and that disconnect required adjustment, a reconciliation between who he had been and who he was becoming. Driving home through fog that blurred the edges of the road, Mike thought about how quiet amplified memory, how moments he had ignored resurfaced now with clarity, choices he had rationalized, patterns he had repeated despite knowing better, and he understood that avoiding those reflections had once been easy amid noise and urgency, but now the quiet insisted on reckoning. That night, sleep came unevenly, interrupted by thoughts not of disasters but of routines, of days repeating without incident, and he realized that his fear was no longer of failure but of stagnation, of becoming complacent, of mistaking stability for completion, and that fear, subtle yet persistent, carried the risk of pushing him back toward familiar chaos if left unexamined. The following days continued in similar fashion, productive yet restrained, and Mike practiced sitting with the quiet, resisting the urge to manufacture problems or seek validation through unnecessary risk, and in doing so he began to sense a different kind of satisfaction forming, quieter than triumph, grounded in alignment rather than excitement. Conversations with the crew grew more thoughtful, less reactive, and he noticed how trust deepened not through grand gestures but through consistency, through showing up the same way each day, and while this constancy lacked spectacle, it built something sturdier than momentum ever had. One evening, as he locked up alone, snow beginning to fall lightly, Mike paused at the gate, listening to the muffled stillness, and he felt the full weight of quiet settle without resistance, accepting it not as absence but as presence, a space where intention could be tested without interference. He understood then that this was the final proving ground, not the chaos of early struggle or the pressure of scrutiny, but the quiet endurance of doing things right repeatedly, without applause, without urgency, and that the same mistakes he feared returning would only do so if he mistook quiet for permission to disengage. As he drove away, headlights cutting through falling snow, Mike felt a subdued confidence take hold, not certainty but commitment, an agreement with himself to remain attentive even when nothing seemed wrong, because it was in those moments, when the valley was quiet and forgiving, that the foundations of failure or resilience were truly laid. The weight of quiet followed him into sleep, heavy yet steady, and he accepted it as part of the landscape now, as integral to Rust Valley as the rust itself, knowing that how he carried it would determine whether this chapter ended in repetition or resolution. The final stretch did not arrive with ceremony or closure but with another ordinary morning, frost clinging stubbornly to metal and glass, the valley breathing slowly as if indifferent to conclusions, and Mike understood immediately that this was fitting, because the story of Rust Valley had never truly been about dramatic endings but about whether the same mistakes would continue to cycle quietly beneath new layers of intention. He unlocked the gate as he had done countless times before, the sound echoing faintly, and as he stepped inside he felt the accumulated weight of everything that had come before, the chaos, the pressure, the quiet, all converging into a single question that no longer demanded an answer spoken aloud but one lived consistently. Had the pattern truly been broken, or merely paused? The yard looked different now, not transformed into something unrecognizable but clarified, cars placed with purpose, pathways open, space intentionally left unused, and Mike recognized that this visual order was not the achievement itself but a byproduct of something deeper, a shift in how decisions were made and followed through, and that realization grounded him more than any external validation ever had. Inside the office, the routine unfolded predictably, schedules reviewed, communications answered, numbers checked, and Mike noticed how his body responded, no longer bracing for surprise, no longer scanning for fires to extinguish, and while that absence of urgency once would have unsettled him, now it allowed for a sharper awareness of detail, of small deviations that could grow if ignored. And he understood that breaking the pattern did not mean eliminating risk but engaging with it earlier, when correction was still possible without spectacle. Avery arrived shortly after, and their exchange was brief but layered, a shared acknowledgement of distance traveled without the need to recount it, and together they discussed plans not in terms of ambition but sustainability, decisions framed by capacity rather than desire, and Mike felt the quiet confidence of restraint settle in, recognizing how often in the past he had mistaken expansion for progress, movement for meaning. The crew filtered in, each person carrying their own relationship to the change that had taken place, and Mike observed them with a clarity he hadn't possessed before, seeing how stability had revealed strengths and weaknesses that chaos had concealed, and he recognized that leadership now required ongoing calibration, not control, and attentiveness to how systems affected people over time. Mid-morning brought a moment that might once have triggered old reflexes, an unexpected offer that promised quick returns but carried hidden complexity, and as Mike listened he felt a familiar pull toward excitement, toward the narrative of bold risk rewarded, yet instead of leaning into it he paused, asked questions, examined implications, and ultimately declined, not out of fear but out of alignment, and when the call ended he sat quietly, absorbing the significance of that choice, because for the first time restraint felt not like loss but like integrity. The day continued with steady progress, tasks completed without urgency, adjustments made without drama, and Mike sensed how the absence of extremes allowed for a different kind of satisfaction to emerge, one rooted in coherence rather than intensity, and he realized that the same mistakes he had spent years repeating had often been fueled by emotional peaks, by chasing validation through action rather than cultivating consistency through patience. In the afternoon, he walked the yard alone, hands in pockets, breath visible in the cold air, and memories surfaced uninvited, images of cars stacked haphazardly, deals made impulsively, relationships strained by unpredictability, and he did not push those memories away, understanding now that forgetting was not the same as healing, and that remembering without reenacting was part of breaking the cycle. Avery joined him later, and they spoke openly about the future, about succession, about what Rust Valley might look like beyond either of them, and Mike felt a subtle shift as they discussed continuity rather than dependence, a recognition that true success would be measured by how well the system endured without constant intervention, and that idea, once threatening to his sense of identity, now felt like relief. As daylight faded, the yard lights cast long shadows, and Mike noticed how different those shadows felt now, no longer hiding disorder but simply extending form, and he thought about how patterns persisted not because people wanted them to but because they were familiar, because breaking them required sustained attention long after motivation faded. Driving home that evening, the road winding through the valley, Mike reflected on how each phase had demanded something different from him. Chaos had demanded courage, pressure had demanded discipline, quiet had demanded self-awareness, and now this phase demanded commitment without novelty, the willingness to continue choosing alignment even when nothing forced the issue. That night, sleep came more easily, not because everything was resolved but because he no longer felt divided against himself, and in that rest he sensed the subtle but profound difference between avoiding mistakes and understanding them, between reacting to patterns and intentionally reshaping them over time. The following days passed without incident, reinforcing the lesson that breaking the pattern was not an event but a practice, repeated daily through choices that rarely drew attention, and Mike embraced that repetition, recognizing it as the true measure of change. Conversations with the crew reflected this shift, focused less on rescue and more on maintenance, less on last-minute saves and more on early intervention, and trust deepened quietly, built on reliability rather than charisma. One morning, as he stood at the gate watching the valley wake, Mike realized that the story of Russ Valley would likely never offer a definitive ending, only ongoing chapters shaped by attentiveness or neglect, and he accepted that ambiguity, understanding that resolution was not about finality but about direction. He thought about the title that had hovered over his journey, The Same Mistakes, and he recognized that while mistakes would continue, because they always did, repeating them no longer felt inevitable, because awareness had interrupted the cycle, creating space for choice where habit once ruled. As winter settled fully, snow blanketing the yard in a quiet uniformity, Mike felt a steady assurance take hold, not confidence in perfection but confidence in process, and that assurance did not eliminate doubt but contextualized it, turning uncertainty into a signal rather than a threat. Standing there, breath rising in the cold, he acknowledged that breaking the pattern required humility, the willingness to remain vigilant even when success tempted complacency, and he committed again, not with grand promises but with attention to the next decision, the next conversation, the next ordinary day. When he finally locked the gate and walked away, the valley behind him silent and steady, Mike understood that the most meaningful restoration he had undertaken was not of metal or machinery but of relationship, with work, with responsibility, with himself, and that while Russ would always return if neglected, care applied consistently could slow its advance, preserving function and form longer than he had once believed possible. The road stretched ahead, familiar yet open, and as he drove into the fading light he carried with him not the fear of repeating the past but the grounded resolve to notice when patterns began to re-emerge, to address them early, and to keep choosing differently, knowing that this quiet, ongoing effort, unremarkable from the outside, was the truest ending Russ Valley could offer, not a conclusion sealed in certainty but a commitment renewed each day, proving that the same mistakes did not have to define the future if they were finally understood.